Hello and welcome to an Envato Tuts Plus course. I'm Adi Purdila, and in this course you'll learn how to use some of the more advanced tools in Adobe XD. Now, we all know Adobe XD, fantastic app for UI design, and it's actually an app that anyone can learn how to use very easily. However, there are a few more advanced tools that will take a little bit more time to get used to and learn properly. And that's what this course is all about. Since we're working with Adobe XD, I want to remind you that you can get all kinds of XD compatible UI kits and assets from Envato Elements, which gives you unlimited downloads of WordPress themes and plugins, web templates, fonts, and more. Now, in this course, we'll be taking a closer look at tools like Auto-Animate, 3D transforms, stacks, and component states. We'll also explore some plugins that will elevate your XD experience. Therefore, this course is a bit more advanced, so you'll need to know the basics of working in XD first, and then watch this course. If you're looking for more beginner-friendly content, we have that as well on Tuts Plus, and I've linked a couple of handy resources down below. However, if you are more experienced with XD and you want to learn some more advanced stuff, then I think we should just get started with the course and learn about Auto-Animate. That's coming up in the next lesson, so I'll see you there. Welcome back to the course. In this lesson, you'll learn how to auto-animate the size, position, and rotation of elements in Adobe XD. And as the course progresses, you'll see more and more complex uses for auto-animate. But it all starts right here with these three properties. So let's get started. Now, this is the project we're going to be creating in this course. It's a simple slider that works something like this. Of course, this is a prototype inside Adobe XD, and it uses Auto-Animate to change the size, position, and rotation of these three elements. So let me show you how we can do that. I've prepared a blank canvas here, and these are the three elements that we need to use. Now, these are all shapes that have an image as a background, and throughout the course, you'll find links to all of the resources and all of the images that I'm using listed in the lesson notes. So then, we'll begin by dragging this right here in the middle, and I'm also going to drag in the next image, like so. But this next one, I'm going to rotate 8 degrees. You can see that in the inspector here. And I'm also going to make it a little bit smaller, something like 322 pixels. Let's align that to the middle. And I'm also going to lower its opacity to 50%. And then I'm going to drag it right here. And I'm going to do the same with this image. So 8 degrees rotation, 322, 50% opacity. Now I'm going to take these three, I'm going to group them up, and I'm just going to move this so it's right in the middle there. Okay, so that looks pretty good. Now let's go ahead and quickly create the pagination. For that, we're going to grab the ellipse tool, draw a circle that's 8 by 8. Remove the border. For fill color, I'm using this 1DD760. And I'm just going to duplicate that, Command D or Control D, place these at 16 pixels, and lower the opacity to about 30%. And let's duplicate that again. And let's group these up. We'll call them pagination. And this we'll call carousel or slider or whatever you want to call it, really. What's important with Auto-Animate is that you keep the same layer names between artboards. Okay, so this is the first artboard done. Let's go ahead and duplicate it 2 more times. On the second artboard, we need to highlight the middle element, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the first one. I'm going to rotate it -8 degrees, height 322, and opacity 50%. So basically it looks something like this, only it's rotated in the opposite direction. Let's move this down a little bit. And let's reset the rotation on this middle element. Let's make it 386. And let's increase the opacity to 100%. So now we're going to move that right there. Maybe move this a little bit like so. And now I'm going to move the whole thing in the middle, something like that. And let's just make a few quick adjustments here, align everything in the middle. And I'm going to place those like so, and that one like so. And now finally, let's align this to the middle. And also, I forgot to align the pagination to the middle. So let's do that. And let's also set a 64 pixel distance between the element above, like that. Okay, so that's artboard number 2. For artboard number 3, let's actually duplicate this one. And I'm going to lower the opacity here. So I'm going to turn this middle one into an inactive, or give it an inactive state. That's -8, 322. And let's make this one active. So reset that, reset the size and the opacity. Select everything like so. Move that. And let's move this in. And that should do it. Now we just need to update our pagination. So on the first artboard, this is fine because it points us to the first image. The second artboard, I'm simply going to lower the opacity here to 30% and back to 100% for the middle one. And then here, 30% and 100%. All right, so now we have these 3 artboards. Now to create that nice animation, we'll jump into the prototype tab. We'll target the first element. We'll drag, well, actually, we need to target the second element, excuse me. So we need to drag this to the second artboard. Trigger is going to be tap. Action is going to be auto-animate. Easing, I usually prefer to go ease in and out. And we can go for like 0.4 seconds. Now from the second artboard, if I click on this element, it should take me back to artboard 1. If I click on this element, it's going to take me to artboard 3. And actually, let me space these out a little bit so it makes a bit more sense. Just like that. And then in artboard 3, the only link we have here is from this element to artboard number 2. All right, so with that said and done, let's select the left one and hit preview. So now, that is our prototype. And by doing this, we auto-animated the size because it goes from this bigger size to a smaller size. We auto-animated the rotation because right now it's at 0 degrees rotation, but as soon as I change, it goes to -8. And also it auto-animates the position because these elements are moving around. And that's the way Auto-Animate works, really. XD looks at 2 artboards and it finds the elements with the same name inside those artboards. And then it detects what changed between artboards. In our case, we're changing size, position, and rotation, but we're also changing the opacity for these elements. And opacity is a property that is supported by Auto-Animate. And I just realized this now. I made a small mistake when resizing this element. So let's jump back to our design here. And this one should be, so the active element should be 240 by 386. This one is actually 200. I forgot to check this this lock aspect icon. So let me just quickly change that back, 240. And then we'll put this in the center. And let's see this one. This one is the correct size. And one last thing I'm going to do actually is to change the triggers here. The trigger duration, I mean, from 0.4 to 0.8, because I think that's a bit smoother. So let's change these, 0.8, and let's change this one as well. So now this is how it looks like. It's very smooth. I'm not sure if you can see how smooth it is, because this is usually recorded or rendered at 30 FPS for the video. But when you're looking at it on a regular display at 60 FPS or 60 Hertz, this is a super smooth animation. And that's how you can auto-animate the position, size, and rotation of elements in Adobe XD. Now, did you know that you can combine masks and auto-animate? Well, you can, and you can actually create some pretty cool animations with them. I'll show you more about that in the next lesson. Welcome back to the course. In this lesson, you'll learn how to combine masks and auto-animate. And with it, you can actually create some very cool animations. So let's get started. This is one of the two examples I'm going to show you in this lesson. And I want you to pay attention to this slider right here and see how it works when I change the slide. See that? Now that's pretty cool, isn't it? It's a very nice effect. Again, this is a prototype in Adobe XD. So let me show you how I did this. I have an artboard set up here with 3 pictures, as you can see. Some decorative elements here at the bottom. And I'm going to start by drawing a rectangle, like so. I'm going to set its fill to 333. Border, I'm going to remove it. And I'm going to make it 160 by 40. And for border radius, I'm just going to go the max value of 20. Next, I'm going to grab the rectangle tool again, make a rectangle that's 32 by 16. Again, I'm going to round off the corners, remove the border, and for fill, I'm going to set this 6C, 6F, 6D. And then I'm going to position this 16 pixels from the left side and in the middle. And I'm going to call this dot 1. I'm going to call this slider BG or slider background. Next, I'm going to duplicate these dots 2 more times. The one on the right, again, 16 pixels from the edge here. And the one in the middle, well, I'm just going to align it in the middle with the background. And let's properly name these. This is dot 2 and this is 3. Next, I'm going to duplicate one of these dots and I'm going to move it up. We're going to call it dot BG. And I'm going to resize this to the full extent here. And I'm going to give it a different color. And that color is 62A973. Now I'm going to duplicate this once more, and I'm going to call it dot mask. Obviously, you can call this whatever you want. And with the dot mask, I'm going to resize it till it spans two of these dots, like so. So then, just for clarity, let me change the color here to red. It doesn't really matter. What we're going to do now is I'm going to take the dot mask and dot BG while making sure the dot mask is the first layer, and I'm going to right click, mask with shape, or Shift Control M. So now I have a mask group 1. Let's rename this to mask. Now, in order for the first element to be visible, or the first dot, I need to move this dot mask to the left. For that, I'm going to lock the .bg's position, and I'm just going to use my arrow keys, or you can also use the mouse to move this to the side so it just covers this first dot. All right, so now let's take this. Let's actually group it up, and let's call it pagination. So now we can go ahead and duplicate this 2 times, and we'll make the necessary changes. In the second artboard, I want to see the second image. So let's move it like so. And also I want to see the middle dot. And to do that, I'm going to go in here under the mask, and I'm going to move the dot mask so that it only covers the middle dot. And then I'm also going to resize it like so. Okay. And on the third artboard, I want to show the third image. So we got to move all of this to the left, and then select the mask, select the dot mask, and then I can move it to the right side so that it only covers the third dot. And it looks like so. So now let's go into prototyping, and we'll select the dot. This will go to this artboard. Trigger is tap, Auto-Animate for action, ease in and out for easing, over, let's say, 0.4 seconds. From the middle artboard, the first one goes here, the third one goes here, and from this third artboard, we do this, and we do this. So now, if we do a little preview, you'll see that we've achieved the exact effect that you saw in the initial demo. So this is possible because we used masks. We have this nice animation on the slider. It's almost like the dot you click on kind of borrows this active colored shape from the one before it. And it's a really, really cool effect. And we can also go in, I actually forgot to target this one from the initial artboard. Let's link that to number 3 here. So now I can move like so. And that is the first example that I want to show you. You can do a lot of things with masks. And one of the cooler animations is for numbers. So you can animate numbers by using masks, and it's going to be like one of those countdown timers that you probably saw around. So I have a starting demo here, but first I want to show you what we'll be creating. So we have this simple artboard, and you'll see that as I drag the slider, the number here animates along with it, and it goes the other way around. And of course, you can go as slow as you want, but achieving this effect is actually very, very simple. So let me show you how you can do that. So we're going to start right here, and I'm going to start with the slider. So grab the rectangle tool, draw a rectangle that's 320 by 8. And for fill, I'm going to use 4849 for E, remove the border, round off the corners, and let's position it in the middle, something like that. Now, I'm going to duplicate this again. So this is the base, this is the active, and I'm just going to resize it like so. Let's actually sample a color from here so that we have a starting point for our animation. Now for the slider dot, we're going to grab the ellipse tool, draw a circle that's 24 by 24. For fill color, let's use, I don't know, maybe this pink. Border, it's going to be 2 points, and let's make it white. And let's also add a shadow to it, 3, 3, and 15. So now I'm just going to position this like so, and I'm going to call it dot. And then I'm going to group these up. I'm going to call them slider. All right. So the way this works is very simple. On the slider dot, actually, we're going to add a drag interaction. And whenever that happens, we're going to animate this number. Now, the way to do it is to first split it up in 3 separate text areas, because right now is just a single text area. So to do that, here's what we'll do. Let's go ahead and copy it and bring it out here. And I'm just gonna change its color so you can see it more clearly. So then, let's duplicate it. I'm gonna say 1. Let's duplicate this. 2. Duplicate it again. 8. Okay. So the number we're trying to get to is, what did we have here? 524. Okay. So we're going to do the following. We're going to select the 1. We're going to do a repeat grid. And we're going to drag down. And I'm also going to reduce the spacing between these items to 0. And we're going to say 2. Oops. 3, 4, and 5. Let's bring these the opacity back to on 100%. Right, so I created a group that goes from 1 to 5 because 5 is the first number or the first digit from the number we're trying to get to. And this group is going to move up like so, and it's going to be animated. Now, for the other ones, I'm going to do the same thing. Repeat grid. And I'm going to drag all the way down. But this time, we have a few more numbers to go through. So we'll do 3, 4, 5, all the way to 9. And then we'll start again from 0. And to make things a little bit easier for us, let's actually ungroup this grid and let's group it up as column 1. let's ungroup this. First, let's make it a little bit bigger. Let's ungroup it, and we'll call this column 2. And let's start working on those numbers. So 9, then we go 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on until we get to 9 again, like that. Now, here we need to know the ending number. So it's 128, 524. So the middle digit here is 2. So we'll need to duplicate 3 more digits here. And we're going to say again 0, 1, and 2. Right? So the very last digit that we're going to write here is the digit that we want our number animation to stop at. Finally, for our third digit, let's actually make things easier for us. I'm going to duplicate this like so. And here we're actually starting at 8. So let's move this up. And I'm actually gonna delete these elements. Okay. So we're starting at 8. We need to add a couple more groups from 0 to 9, but the ending number here is 4. So we have 8, 9, 0, 1, 2, all the way back to 9, and then we start again. So let's do this. Let's select these, duplicate. And actually I made a mistake there. I should have started with 0 like that. So duplicate, drag it in. And let's do that one more time. Of course, you can add as many of these groups as you want to make this animation more realistic. And the number we need to end at is 4. So I'm going to drag 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4, duplicate, and bring it all the way down. Cool. And this right here will be called column 3. Okay, so that is our number. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to take this, group it up. I'm going to call it number. And then I'm going to drag a rectangle, something like that. It's a rectangle that's basically going to cover the number. So then I'm going to take this and the number, right click, and select mask with shape. This is barely in the screen here, but you can see it. Shift Control M on a PC, and I believe it's Shift Command M on a Mac. So mask with shape. And now the only thing that we're seeing is the starting number. So let's go ahead and copy this and bring it in inside of our number here. Just paste that in. Like so. Let's delete the old number. Let's call this mask. And let's fill this up with white. So now, to achieve the effect that we want, we're going to duplicate this artboard. I'm going to move the dot to a new position. And actually, let's first increase the width of this of the slider, and I'm just going to move the slider like so. And then to show the new number, we got to go inside the mask, and I'm simply going to move it like so. And then I'm going to move this one. I'm actually going to use my arrow keys because it's a little bit easier. So I'm just holding down Shift and arrow up. Like that. And I'm going to do the same thing here. Shift, arrow up. until I get to 524. Just like that. All right. So now let's animate it. We're going to go into prototype, and I'm going to target the slider dot, drag to the second artboard. Trigger is going to be drag. Action is going to be auto-animate. And for this one, we can actually not specify an easing. And then we're going to go to the second artboard and do the exact same thing in reverse. So now, if we preview this, there it is. It goes from 128 to 524. Very, very smooth animation. And this was all possible thanks to using masks. And these are just two examples of what you can do with masks and Auto-Animate. So give this some thought, and you'll see that this is actually a very, very powerful feature that's available in Adobe XD. All right, so with that out of the way, let's move on to the next lesson, where you'll learn how to add multiple interactions to the same element. So I'll see you there. Welcome back to the course. In this lesson, you'll learn how to add multiple interactions to a single element in Adobe XD. Now, this was not always the case with prototyping in XD. Until recently, you could only add a single interaction per element. This was recently changed, though, and now you can add as many as you want, provided you have triggers for them. So let's take a look at an example and see how it works. This is the prototype we'll be creating in this lesson. So you'll notice that on this element, I have two interactions. I have a drag interaction that allows me to scroll this horizontal group. And I also have a tap interaction that opens up in this new artboard. And this is actually pretty simple to create, so let's get started. We're going to start right here. So I'm going to move this down. And let's start by cleaning things up a little bit here. So this is the content. I'm just going to ungroup that. Sections, this is another grid, so I'm going to ungroup that as well. So now we have the section for sushi. Let's call this burgers, soup, and sushi. And I'm doing this because I don't want to be any conflicts in naming when we auto-animate. So we have sushi, and then we have all of these cards here. And actually, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go into each one of these cards, and I'm going to unlink these elements or unlink the component. And I'm just going to do that on these first elements. And then I'm going to target this BG. I'm going to call it sushi picture. I'm doing that because we need to expand this picture in the next artboard, and it needs to have the exact same name for Auto-Animate to work properly. So now, let's go ahead and create this first interaction, the drag. So select this artboard, Command D, and then just select the sushi slider and just move it like something like this. So then let's go to prototype, select this first card, link it to the second artboard, drag for trigger, auto-animate for action, easing none. And I'm actually gonna select the second one from the second artboard and link it back. So now we should have something like this. A nice drag interaction. Now, I also want to be able to click on this element and open up the third artboard, which looks something like this. So to make that happen, let's go ahead and duplicate this artboard like so. And I'm going to select these two elements, set the opacity to 0. And then from this artboard, we just need the picture and title. So I'm going to select nearby, opacity 0. I'm going to select this, that's opacity 0. Also this background. Sushi, let's also reduce its opacity. And now I can take this image, I can move it like so, make it bigger. This needs to be 340 pixels so that it matches the height of the image that we're trying to create. Let's grab this sushi place text. And actually, you know what? Let's copy this one. So Command C and Command V, or Control C and Control V for on Windows. Let's put that over there. And now, if we do a quick test, I'm going to select this element, and notice we have a plus sign here that's telling us that we can add another interaction, or we can click this plus sign right here. So just click, drag to the new artboard, auto-animate, the trigger will be tap, and easing, we can just go ease in and out over 0.8 seconds. So let's see if this works. I still have the drag interaction available to me, but as soon as I click this, it's gonna open up in the new artboard. Let's also add a small interaction on this element right here. This needs to basically go back. And let's see about the other elements. We need to add the reviews and also the description here. So let's copy, or let's actually first group these two up. We'll call them reviews. And let's select this, and these two, group them up as description. And let's go ahead and copy these two, paste them in here. And in order for Auto-Animate to work properly, they also need to be present in my original artboard. So let's paste those in as well. And actually, I'm just gonna move them outside, like all the way down. Oops. Right, like all the way down here, so that they'll have a nice animation coming in. So now it looks something like this. And I can also choose to lower their opacity to, let's say, 10% here, so that when they come in from the bottom, they also have their opacity animated as well. And that's how you can use multiple interactions on the same element. As you saw, we have a drag interaction added to this first one, but also a tap interaction, or a tap trigger, that allows me to switch to a completely different artboard for that second interaction. Now, have you ever heard about micro interactions? These are tiny animations that usually give users feedback on certain actions. I'll show you some examples and also how you can create your own in the next lesson. So I'll see you there. Welcome back to the course. In this lesson, I'm going to show you how to create micro interactions in Adobe XD. So let's begin. Now, first of all, what is a micro interaction? Well, these are small animations that are designed to offer feedback on certain actions that are taken by the user, or usually clarify what's going on. You can also think of it like a bit of user feedback to let you know that you did the right thing. And I went to Dribble to show you some micro interactions. These are all creations by Dribble members. And I think this is a very good example. Notice how when you tap on this down icon, you get this little animation with the circle and the way it ripples out. That's a micro interaction. It's a very small animation that lets you know that, hey, you tapped on this down arrow and you're actually doing the right thing. You're switching between these items. And actually, the interaction is very well represented by the way this whole input is moving, by the way the text scrolls down into view. It's a very good piece of user feedback. Another animation that is considered to be a micro interaction is the one that you can see on these icons. Right? You can use these two different states on, for example, hover or when you click on a certain element. And you can see the way they change is, again, another great visual indicator that you've taken the correct action. Here's another one. See how these menu items change when you move between them? Well, again, that's a micro interaction. And the animation is very tiny. We have a bit of a scale animation. We change the color, and also we change this, this visual indicator. Another great example is this one. See how these change? Right? The icon rises, it changes color, and also the text kind of rises up and fades in. And actually for this demo, for this lesson, I'm gonna recreate this animation as faithfully as possible in Adobe XD. So let's get started right here. I went ahead and kind of replicated the starting point. I'm not using the exact same icons as the author, but I tried to use the same colors and roughly the same spacing as the author. Now, to make this work, there are three things that are happening on each animation. First, we're moving this element, right? This big bubble, we're moving it to the active element. Second, we're fading in the text from below. And third, we're moving the icon up and we're giving it this, this blue color. Now, here's the thing. Auto-Animate currently doesn't support color transitions. So I can't just create another artboard with this shape being a different color. It's not going to animate smoothly. It's going to change its color, but it's not going to do it smoothly like we have it here. So to get around that, we're going to be a bit creative and we're going to use masks. And we're going to use them in the following way. We're going to create two rectangles here. So one is going to be like that. Let's remove the border, duplicate it, and let's move it down. And make sure that the icon can fit inside this rectangle while it's in its inactive position. So this will be our gray background, and this will be our blue background. We're going to take these and we're going to move them down. We're going to take the icon and sample that color and use it to fill the first background. And for the actual color here, we can use red. It doesn't matter what color we use. I use red just for separation. And then I'm going to select this color and paste it there. So now, while making sure that the icon sits on top of these two backgrounds, I'm going to select them. I'm going to right click and say mask with shape. And you can actually see this right here. It's outside of the recording area, but the Keyboard shortcut for Windows is Shift Control M. I believe it's Shift Command M for macOS. Right, so that's mask group 1. Let's call this mask messages. So now what I'm going to do is duplicate this, move it right there, and I'm going to call it mask images. I'm going to open it up, and I'm going to take this icon material image and replace it. For that, actually, we need to ungroup the mask first. Right, delete that, and I'm actually going to bring that icon up just a little bit so that it matches, or it's inside my my second background. So with these selected, again, mask with shape. We're going to call this mask messages. And we're going to do the exact same thing, Command D, bring it in here, ungroup mask, delete that old icon, select these, mask with shape, and we're going to call this mask settings. All right, so now we have basically almost everything we need. We still need to add the text here. So let's duplicate this. We're going to move it there. We're going to call this images and settings. Make sure it's in the center of that icon. So now I'm going to take this, duplicate 2 times, and then on the very first artboard, we'll take the text here, we'll set its opacity to 0, and I'm also going to move them down like so. On the second artboard, I'm going to move this circle to the middle. I'm going to move this icon, to the top, like so. And I want to make sure it has the exact same Y position as the other one, 628, 628, like that. Messages and settings. Again, let's push them down, lower their opacity. And also, I need to set the Y position of this icon to 675. Just like that. And you'll see that because this icon is the actual mask, as it moves through each background, it gets the color of that background. So let's push this back to 675. Okay, so that's artboard number 2, and on artboard number 3, we gotta do it here for the settings. So I'm gonna take these 2, push them down, lower their opacity, 675 there. And I gotta move this up. It was what, 628, I believe. Just like that. Cool. So now let's link everything in the prototyping mode. So I'm gonna target this element, and that's gonna take us to this. Tap Auto-Animate, ease in and out. Let's do 0.8 seconds. We're going to do the exact same for this one, like that. And then for the rest, it's just a matter of linking everything together, like so. And now, once everything is done, look at that. I think we can do a better job with the easing duration, maybe 0.4 seconds here. Yep, that's much better. All right. And that looks almost as good as this animation. Here we probably have a slightly different easing when we change this element, or when the author, Aaron Eicher, changes to those menu items. But overall, ours is actually pretty close. And that's a micro interaction, one that you can very easily create in Adobe XD. And as I said, we had to get a little bit creative with how we're going to change the color on these elements because we can't transition colors. And just to make it a bit clearer for you, let me change the duration on this interaction to 5 seconds, so you can see exactly what's going on there. So pay close attention to how this element changes color, right? It basically moves up, and as it passes through the two mask layers, it changes colors from this gray to the active blue. And the same goes for this one. Notice that when it goes down, it changes color from blue gradually to the gray. Cool. Now, this is one example of a micro interaction you can create. Another example will be a animated icon for a charging battery. So we're starting out with a simple icon, and I have this frame here, and inside I have a level for the battery. So at 0%, it should be like all the way down here, and maybe even lower its opacity. But then we can do like 25%, and that element should be about 58 pixels in height. Then at 50%, should be around 120, something like that. 75% is around 175, something rather. And then at 100%, it should be at 235. All right, so how do you link this in the prototype? And here I have an example that I've already worked on. Well, if we switch to prototype, we can select the first artboard and we can link it to the second, and we'll use a time trigger. Delay 0 seconds. Easing, we can do ease in and out to maybe, I don't know, 0.2 seconds. And we can do the same. And then once we get to 100%, we go back to 0. So our prototype will look something like this. Pretty cool, right? Now on this last one, we can actually remove the easing. Or if you want like a linear feel to these, we can remove the easing on all of them. So now the animation looks like this. And we can actually select this last one and set the easing to 0. So we don't have that that awkward change right at the end. And this is another micro interaction that you can create with Adobe XD. All right, and that concludes the chapter about Auto-Animate. Now, let's move on to 3D transforms. This is a feature that was added to XD in late 2020, and it basically allows us to add perspective to elements by rotating them around the 3 axes and setting the various depths. I'll tell you more about 3D transforms in the next lesson, so I'll see you there. Welcome back to the course. In this lesson, I'm going to show you how to create some awesome 3D transforms in Adobe XD and also animate them. Now, if you're looking for an introduction to 3D transforms, I also did a short tutorial on the topic on Envato Tuts Plus, and you can find a link to it down below. This is a little bit more advanced, so let's go ahead and get started. This is what we'll be creating in this lesson. We have a simple carousel, and it goes something like this. Right? We can see the images. They go from that perspective to this 2D look, and we also have an interesting glow that matches the image itself. You can see pretty smooth transition, and this is actually very easy to create with XD. So let's get started. Here I have a blank artboard and the 3 images that we're going to use. I got these images from Mixkit, and you can download them yourself for free using the links in the lesson notes. So then I'm going to take these images and I'm going to move them up like so. I'm going to select all of them. I'm going to actually group them up, and I want to make sure that I have the correct ordering. So image 2 actually goes above, image 3 goes above. So image 1 is the one on top, followed by the other 2. So let's align these like so. And then I'm actually going to start making these images a little bit shorter. Actually, I don't need this group. So we're going to take image 3, which is on the top, and we're going to make it 700 pixels tall. This image 2 is going to be 750 pixels tall. Now, before we get to the actual 3D transforms, we need to add that fancy glow that I showed you around these items. So how do we do that? Well, it's actually very simple. Let me show you. Let me start by hiding these images first. So here I'm actually using a mask for these images. And what I'm going to do is duplicate this image. I'm going to go back to the parent element, and I'm going to resize it like so. I can even disregard the aspect ratio and make it exactly the size of that mask. So now what I'm going to do is go to the inspector and check background blur, but instead choose object blur. Amount 30% or 30 should be enough. But now I need to move it behind my main image. And just like that, we have a nice glow. And I actually want to name this shadow. And we can resize this to whatever size we want. Right, so that's our first image. Now we just have to repeat the process with the other 2 images. So in here, we're going to copy that, paste it in. And then we go to Object Blur. We move it behind, and we just make it slightly bigger, like so. Right, so that's the second image. And let's do the same for the first image. And let's push it behind the main image. And if you feel like this this shadow is a bit too intense, you can actually lower its opacity. But I think it looks pretty good like this. So now, once we have these three images and their shadows, we can go ahead and select all of them, align them to the middle, and let's bring up 3D transforms by clicking on this button or by pressing Command or Control T. And we're going to rotate these elements, all of them, 45 degrees on the X axis. And I'm just going to bring them down like so. And then I'm going to go to each one and I'm going to hide their shadows. Now, the reason we're not seeing these images properly is because we actually have a different Z position for each. So while image 3 should be on the top, it's currently sitting at the bottom. So let's go ahead and fix that. We'll set the Z index here to 5. Image 2, we'll set it to, I don't know, 2 or whatever. And image 1, we can just set it to 0. All right. And finally, what we can do is we can lower the opacity on these images. So 90% on image 3, 50% on image 2. And I'm using the numbers on my keypad from 0 to 9 to lower the opacity of these images. All right, so that is our starting point. Now, let's go ahead and add that button. And I'm just gonna paste it in here. It's just a simple button. And that should take us to the second artboard. So then let's duplicate this bit. And let's go ahead and hide this button right here and lower its opacity. And then this first artboard should show image 3. Let's reset its rotation and its size, and let's put it just like that. And also I'm gonna display the shadow. And one last thing I want to do here is for image 2, I want to lower the rotation here to 40 degrees instead of 45. Okay, so that is artboard 2. Now let's do another one. This is artboard 3. In this case, this one will get rotated something like that to like -75. We're going to bring it to the very top and we're going to lower its opacity all the way. And then we're going to bring this up, bring the opacity to 100%, rotation here to 0. And we're going to align it in the middle. And we're also going to display the shadow. And finally, let's change the opacity of this element here to 50%. And let's also change its rotation to 40 degrees there. And finally, let's do this. Let's rotate this again to 75 negative, bring it up, lower its opacity, and let's display this one correctly. And let's display the shadow. Finally, on the last slide, this one should be displayed on the top. 0 opacity. And I'm just going to paste that button that allows us to restart the carousel. All right, so now Let me actually move these down a little bit. And let's focus on the prototyping stage. So we'll go to prototype, and we're going to start right here. We'll go to this one, tap, Auto-Animate, ease in and out, and we can go for like 0.8 seconds. This one, the trigger will be the actual image. Same goes for this. Same goes for this. In here, we can actually go all the way back to the initial artboard. And let's give it a go. See how this works. Pretty cool. Now, there are certain things that I noticed are not particularly correct. For example, on this first artboard, I forgot to change the opacity of this element back to 100%. And we're also missing the animation for this button. So let's copy it from here. Let's also paste it in here. And we're going to move it up and lower its opacity. And I'm also going to copy this, paste it in here, move it down, and lower its opacity. So now we should be good to go. Start, first one, second one, third one. Okay, we only need to add a nice animation for this button between this artboard and this artboard. So copy it here, paste, bring it down, opacity to 0. And now it goes like that. So all the elements are now nicely animated in between the slides. Now, if you want to be fancy about this, you can actually add a small parallax effect because the images are set in a mask. You can actually decide to make these bigger or smaller, right? Like that. And like that. So now it's going to look slightly different. You're going to notice that as I'm starting the carousel, the image here, or the actual mask, will get bigger, of course, but the image inside will also get bigger. See? So that's pretty cool. That's a more advanced take on working with 3D transforms in Adobe XD. And that's it for 3D transforms. Now, let's move on and talk about creating layouts. If you've ever worked with Figma and Figma's auto layout feature, then you know how powerful that is. Well, XD has something similar called stacks. And stacks allow you to space elements evenly in a group, move them around very easily, and also add padding. So let me show you how you can work with that in the next lesson. Welcome back to the course. In this lesson, you're going to learn how to use the new stacks feature to easily create layouts. Let me show you how. Here I'm using some elements that I got from a UI kit called Navigo Transportation. Now, that's a free kit, and you will find a link to it in the lesson notes. Now, let's say we have this card, right, with these 3 elements. Now, what happens if we want to rearrange these? Well, you can simply drag them like so, and making sure that all the distances here are equal and everything is aligned properly. What if you want to add another element? Well, you will need to select a separator and an element, Command D to duplicate, drag them into position, and then go to the background and resize that as well. This can sometimes be very time consuming because you have to stop and remeasure and realign everything. Well, this is one thing that you can resolve very easily with stacks. So, to work with stacks, you need to select the parent element and in the inspector, check stack. Now, this has two modes, vertical and horizontal, and XD is smart enough to recognize that my items here are displayed in a vertical manner, so it's selected vertical for me, but I can always switch between the two. Now, what's nice about stacks is that you can hold down the S key and you can determine what distance you want between items. So if I want, for example, 16 between these two, I can do that very easily. What I can also do is hold down Shift and S and alter the distance between all the items. So that's really easy to adjust now. Look at how simple that is. So let's keep this at 16. And you also notice that the background now resizes automatically. And that's because when we created a stack, we also enabled padding. And XD measured the distance that I had between my item and the background, and it applied those distances as padding all around. And with this new feature, I can select individual padding values like I have here, or I can select a single padding value, let's say 24 pixels, or I can go 48 pixels. And you'll see that the background resizes automatically. And I can change the value of that padding just like before by holding down the S key and changing that value, just dragging it up or down to the value that I want. So very, very useful feature. Now I can also nest various stacks. So I'm going to select this card. I'm going to add a stack to it. And let's also set a padding here of 24 pixels. And let's also set a distance here between these items of, let's say, 16 pixels. And then I can go in here where I have the rating. Basically, it's just a list of dots. And I can add a stack to this as well. Notice XD now determined that this is a horizontal stack. It automatically added 4 pixels for spacing between these items, and I'm good to go. Now, there is another benefit to using stacks that I haven't told you about. Watch what happens when I now want to move an element from a stack. All the other elements will move automatically for me. How easy is that? You just drag and drop an element to its new position. Now be aware, this doesn't constrain the element to that particular side, so you can move it left, right, up or down depending on the direction of the stack. So you would still need to do a bit of work when aligning items. But in terms of the ease of use, this is very, very nice. And it also works on a horizontal stack. So maybe I want to select this item and I want to move it right here. I can do that very, very easily. Now, this also works when, for example, you don't have a background set to your elements. So select all of them. Control Command G to create a group, because stacks only works on groups. And then you can hold down Shift S to determine the distance between the stack items. Now, there is another benefit to using this new functionality. It's now easier than ever to create something like a button that has a background that adjusts to the size of the content. So for example, I have this this button here, and I can skip the stack entirely and just go for padding. So let's say I want 16 pixels of padding. Now, when I change the text, you'll see that the background resizes accordingly, which is fantastic. So that's how you can work with the new stacks and padding functionality in Adobe XD. Now, if you've worked in Adobe XD before, then you've probably used components. But did you know that you can now add component states? Well, I'll tell you more about those in the next lesson, so I'll see you there. Welcome back to the course. In this lesson, I'm going to show you how to work with component states. These allow you to create variants or multiple variants of a component and switch between those variants very easily. This is super useful for creating buttons or form elements, for example. So let me show you how this works, and let's create some component states. All right, here I have some more elements from the Navigo UI kit that I showed you in a previous lesson. And let's say that, let me actually ungroup this. Let's say that I want to create another version of this card. The first step I need to do is create a component. Okay, and by default, this has a default state. So let's go ahead and create another one by clicking this button and selecting New State. You can call this whatever you want. I'm going to name it State 2. And with it, we can simply go in here. Let's say we want to increase or decrease the size of some of these elements. So I'm going to call this 125. This one is a bit bigger, so maybe 452. And maybe this one will be 310. Something like that. So now you'll see that when I select the component, I can really easily switch between states. So this can have like a gajillion uses. You can create like a pricing table where you create a component for a pricing plan, and you can just switch between those states to display the entire table. I mean, for example, here I can simply duplicate this this component, and I can choose to display the default state in the first one and state 2 in the second one. See how easy it is to display multiple versions of the same element? Really, really cool. This also works very well with buttons. So for example, I could have a component button here, and I can add like a new state for, let's say, hover or active. All right, so let's say the active state, make sure that is selected. I can change the fill color to something a lot darker, right? And I can then easily switch between the two. I can also create a hover state for this button. And the hover state, let's say I want this to be a bit lighter. And you'll notice that if I'm going to open up a prototype here, and I switch to the default state, I get that hover state or XD displays that hover state when I actually hover on the element with my mouse button, which is pretty cool. So that's the gist of working with states. Now, because this is a more advanced course, I'm going to show you a more advanced way of working with component states. And I'm sure you remember this example from the lesson about using masks and Auto-Animate, right? In that lesson, we used 3 different artboards to create the animation, right? And in each artboard, I would basically move these images, and I will also move the mask between these dots. Well, Auto-Animate also works with component states. So we can actually recreate this gallery demo by using a single artboard, and of course by using components. So the first step is to select both of these, group them up. I'm going to call it gallery, and I'm going to create a component out of it. Here, this is the default state, and I'm going to create a new state that I'm going to call state 2. Now with state 2 selected, I can go ahead and make my changes. I can go in here and I can choose which image to display. And also I can go in here and move the mask to its correct position. Like so. And then select this, add another state, state 3. And in state 3, I'm going to choose to display image 3. And the mask, I'm just going to move it to its correct position here. And actually, I need to make this a little bit bigger, like so. And just move it like so. Okay, so that is my component. We have state 1, state 2, and state 3. So now with the default state selected, although it doesn't really matter, I can go to prototype. I can select the component. And in the default state, I can select this pill. I can drag a wire to the same artboard. The trigger is going to be tap, action is going to be Auto-Animate, and for destination, I'm going to choose state 2. This one, I'm going to choose state 3. And for both of these, let's not forget to use ease in out and maybe 0.6 seconds. Okay, now let's select the component again and choose state 2. In state 2, I'm going to select the pill. This should go to the default state, and this should go to state 3. And then I'm going to select the component again, switch to state 3, and choose default here, and state 2 here. All right. So with that, let's go ahead and preview our gallery. And let me just resize this so you can see it better. And there it is. We have the exact same animation, the exact same prototype, but this time we used a single artboard, but we used a component with multiple states. This is a much more elegant approach, although it's not as simple as the one we originally used. It's a little bit more complex to get the grasp of, but once you do, you'll see that it's very, very powerful, and component states can be used in lots of different places. All right, now for the final lesson of this course, we'll have a look at 5 plugins that will take your XD experience to the next level. That's coming up in the next lesson, so I'll see you there. Welcome back to the course. In this final lesson, I'm going to show you 5 plugins that I consider to be a must-have for any XD user. And these will augment your experience in XD and will make certain tasks a lot easier to accomplish. So let's have a look at those 5 plugins. The first one is called Rename It. And this is a plugin that allows you to, well, keep your XD files organized. And you can batch rename layers, artboards, and all that good stuff. Now, I would just like to mention that all the plugins that I show you here can be installed from Adobe XD. You just need to go to the Plugins tab here, click on the plus sign, and just browse and search for the proper plugin. And then you just hit install from this link here. So Rename It. This is a very useful plugin for when you want to batch rename artboards, layers, and so on. And I'm not going to spend too much time on these plugins. I'm just going to show you their basic functionality, and I'll let you discover the rest of what they can do. So for example, we have a couple of layers here, and they're all called field. Now, instead of manually renaming all of these, I can simply select all of them. I can go to my Plugins tab, rename it, rename selected layers, or use the keyboard shortcuts for your system. So let's rename these. And let's say I want to call them rows. And here you can see a preview of what they will look like. And you can also add like numbers to define a sequence. Here is ascending, descending. You can also add like a parent name. So for example, you can do percentage O and then a dash. And then maybe you want to do another dash here and you get this bit. Once you're happy with the changes, hit rename and all of those layers are now renamed. Very, very useful. You can also change from uppercase to lowercase. There are tons of stuff you can do with Rename It. So make sure you install it and discover everything that it can do. The next plugin is called UI Faces. And I'm sure you know the website, UI Faces. This is basically a website you can get a bunch of avatars for your website design. And there are plugins for all the major design softwares out there. For Adobe XD, it works very simply like so. You select the avatars or the shapes that you want to contain avatars. In your app, you go to Plugins, UI Faces, you select the source that you want for those images. You can, of course, go and check out some advanced options here, but you basically can hit apply and the plugin will download images and will apply them to those shapes you selected. Very, very useful. You can also select photos if that's what you want. You have currently 6 selected shapes, and you can go ahead and select the ones that you want from this list. And then you would hit apply, and it's going to apply them like so. Now, this next plugin is called Google Sheets, and it basically allows you to load the information from a Google Sheet or a CSV file and paste it in certain fields in your design. So, to show you an example, I have created a simple Google spreadsheet. with some information here. I have name, message, and picture. And for each of these, I filled in some random information along with some picture links from Unsplash. And let's say I want to place this information right here in this design. So the name would go here, message here, and picture here. Well, that's really easy to do with this plugin. Basically, you select the parent element, you go to Google Sheets, open up the panel. This is going to show you the elements that you have selected. And then you go to source and you can paste a URL link. You can go to Google Sheets, or you can upload a CSV file. I'm going to paste the URL link and I'm going to hit import. All right, so that's going to read the information that I have here. It's going to determine that there are 3 categories: name, message, and picture. And it's going to ask me how to map that information to my elements. So for example, the message in my design will map to the message field from my CSV. The name in my design, which is this, will map to the name I have in my file. BG, I don't want to map that to anything. Divider, avatar, badge. From these, I only want to map the avatar to picture. Okay, so once that is done, I can hit apply. Right, so as you can see, the text content was inserted almost immediately, but right now I'm just waiting for the images to be downloaded and applied to my shapes. Now, this is a very useful plugin for when you have a lot of repeating elements in a layout and you don't want to populate them every time with different data, right? You have some spreadsheets somewhere saved or some CSV files, and you can use those or that information in all of your designs. This is a very fast way of doing things, especially when adding placeholder content. And just like that, you saw the plugin also downloaded the pictures and applied them exactly to the shapes that I told it to. You can randomize the content if you want to, and you can hit refresh, or you can load a totally different file if you want that. But that is the Google Sheets plugin. Our next plugin is called Icons for Design, and this basically gives you access to over 5,000 icons. To open it up, you can go to Plugins and open up Icons for Design, and you can search for specific icons. For example, let's search for users, and this gives you all the icons that match your search criteria from various icon sets. So I have this demo set up here where I'm missing some icons. All right, so I can simply click, and that's gonna paste an icon in my artboard. And I can simply come in here, paste it. I can, align it like so. I can resize it, and I can give it a proper color. Maybe something like that, I don't know. What else do I have next? Settings, right? I can search for settings, and I can grab an icon that I feel would work best for what I need here. And there we go, that's the settings icon. I can look at some of the other icons in here, and I can see that they're 22 pixels high. And I can adjust that to match. And I can, of course, change the color to this as well. And I can do the same for notifications. So Icons for Design, a great little plugin that you can use if you don't want to bother with organizing your own icons, or if you just want something really quick. The final plugin is Undraw, which allows you to download free illustrations to Adobe XD directly from the interface. Now, Undraw is a website that you can download these very cool illustrations, and you can change their colors. And all of these come in the form of SVG files. Well, with the XD plugin, you can simply open it up and you can select the illustration that you want, copy, and that's been automatically copied to your clipboard. So now you just need to paste it wherever you want to in your artboard. How easy is that? And you have a lot of illustrations to choose from. So yeah, Undraw, great little plugin. You can also search for illustrations. And if you want to change colors, it's actually very easy. Once you download an SVG, it automatically adds that color to your assets panel. So you can actually now just edit that color and make that illustration any color that you want. It's really that easy. And these are the 5 plugins that I think you should definitely get if you're using Adobe XD. All right, and that's it for this course. I hope it was useful and you were able to learn some of the more advanced aspects of Adobe XD. Thank you very much for watching. I'm Adi Purdila, and until next time,